I've had many, but the one that stands out was probably the time my wife and I were having some money worries. We were talking it over downstairs when our 6-year-old came downstairs with his piggy bank and told us that we could have all his money if it would help the situation. We hadn't even realized he'd been listening. We gave him such a hug, and it reminded us that despite being low on funds temporarily, we had so many other things to be thankful for, like wonderful kids. Edit. Thank you for the kind words. I had no idea this would gain so much attention. It's so nice to receive notifications all day with these little heartwarming stories. Story 1. I was fixing something for my 9-year-old daughter and the knife slipped and cut my finger. Blood, of course, was pouring out, so I taped it up and cleaned up the mess. She walked over to me and gave me a big hug and told me she was sorry I hurt myself. She is not a physical contact kid and has never initiated a hug, so it meant a lot to me. The cut was nothing, of course. I have 12 years of construction experience, so bleeding is not something unusual for me. Story 2-1. My 19-year-old daughter. When she was 10 years old, she wrote me a poem for Father's Day that she read in front of the class. A lot of fathers were there on that day. I couldn't help but tear up. My 18-year-old daughter. When she turned 18, she told her friends she wanted to hang out with her dad because he's cool. My 15-year-old son. Not too long ago, he knocked on our bedroom door and asked if we could talk. I sat up, and he told me he was proud to be my son and that he loved me. First, I thought he broke something. Story 3. After my ex-wife and I got divorced, I hatched a plan with my kids to sail around the Pacific the year my son turns 18 and is no longer subject to our parenting plan. I used the idea of the trip to get them interested in swim lessons, reading up on islands in the Pacific, looking for places to visit, and the mechanics of sailing and navigation. It became our family's long-term goal. One afternoon, my daughter and I were talking about the trip and getting to the last few legs of the journey. Lay up in Hawaii for a bit to stock up on water, food, and fuel for the passage back to Seattle. Then I'll deliver you both back to the same dock we left from, so you can go back to college and your brother can start college. She got a puzzled look on her face, looked at me and asked, "Well, what are you going to do then?" I told her, "Well, I guess I'll just keep going." She snuggled up to me, gave me a big hug, and said, "Then I want to come with you." Misty just typing about it 4 years later. God, their love is so perfect. Story 4. I was sitting outside reading a book. The kids were out with their mom. They came back and all went into the house except my second child. She came and asked if she could sit next to me. She sat down, rested her head next to my arms, and just sat there. I closed my book and put my arms around her and just luxuriated in the feeling. After 20 minutes with no word spoken, she said, "I like spending time with you, Daddy." Pollen count was a bit high that day. Story 5. Was watching Lilo and Stitch with my son, who is 3, and daughter, who is 5. My son fell asleep in my arms. It hit me suddenly that at his age and size this may be the last time he falls asleep in my arms. I still get a tear thinking about it. Story 6. I hadn't seen my daughter for a couple of months due to work. My ex-wife notified me that our daughter needed a desk lamp and showed me a boring one. My daughter is 9 years old. I waited for my paycheck, then bought and shipped her a lamp that projects spiraling stars onto the ceiling after spending a lot of time searching through lamps suitable for girls. She texted me saying she loved it and loved me. Story 7. I had a tender moment with my son. He made me a pen holder for Father's Day when he was 6. It has been in my office since, and he visited my office when he was 12. He saw what he made for me on the table. He got all emotional and said, "Dad, you still have this. I love you." Story 8. My 6-year-old son, who is very fond of numbers and recently discovered percentages in a Minecraft book, said, "Daddy, when you rub my back, I will be 14% happier." After rubbing his back, he said, "I am 13% happier now. Your hands were cold. Do you want to be 14% happier?" Story 9. So picture 2 bratty girls in 6th grade talking about their best friends, literally discussing who is better than whom and so on. They go to school together. I'm making a fire for them for some s'mores, acting like I'm not listening. These girls are cousins to my daughter and me. My daughter is in fourth grade. It was Christmas Eve, and I watched my daughter try to fit in with them all day, acting a little older than she usually does. They eventually got to my daughter and asked her, kind of bratty, "So, who's your little best friend?" Without waiting a second, like she's been waiting for them to ask her, she says, "Well, they're not really little. It's my dad." Those girls get quiet and kind of giggle, so I look at my daughter to see how she responds. She's looking at me with this beautiful smile. She was so proud to name me. I then say, "I forgot the matches," as I'm holding them, and walk off crying. It was such a moment for me. Story 10. I don't think it's so much one memorable moment, but more little things every day. When I come home from work and I hear his little feet running through the living room with screams of "Dada." When I'm tucking him in at night and he makes me give his stuffed sheep Baba a kiss goodnight. When he finds something cool in the garden, like some ants or something, and he comes running and screaming "Dad," because he wants me to see. There are too many to mention without boring everyone to death. Mostly it's lots of tiny little magical moments, watching them discover new things and grow. When I reflect on it, I always think to myself, how can I be so lucky to have such an amazing, funny, and smart child? And I'm sure everyone else who has kids thinks the same. Story 11. This actually just happened this morning. Not tender as much as profound. My daughter is almost 2 years old. My wife can juggle, but I cannot. My daughter must think everyone can juggle and brought over the balls for me and said, "Dada, juggle." I knew I could not juggle, so I never tried more than once. After a few attempts, I got further than I ever had before. I kept going and was able to juggle for a few seconds. I kept going and got even better. She was so happy. I then realized that I would never juggle because I knew I could not do it. The only reason I can juggle now is because my daughter believed in me. Thanks, Lily. I know you can do anything too. Story 12. Early on, my daughter was about 8 months old. I always listened to music I like with her. One night, she was especially crabby, and I was trying to calm her down. I put on some Radiohead and started singing True Love Waits so I didn't go crazy. She snuggled up and fell asleep in about 30 seconds. I still sing to her at night and she's 6. Story 13. I went to see my youngest, 4 years old, at his daycare in the middle of the day during a break in my workday. I came around the corner into his room and he simply got up, walked over to me and held out his arms, so I picked him up. He didn't say anything but held me as hard as he could with his little arms, putting his face in my neck, and I could feel his breath. I asked if he was okay and everything was fine, and he just shook his head yes. I let him hold me until he couldn't squeeze any longer. Then, I put him down and he walked back into the room. That was it. His teacher told me that he heard about an officer getting shot on the news and was worried about his dad. Perfect timing. Story 14. My 3 girls are stepkids. When the oldest was about 12, she had gotten firmly into both, "You're not my real dad," and "I'm a tween girl. Nobody understands me." One time she had to come back before her sisters on a long weekend visit because she had some school stuff that needed to get done, and she was really quiet the whole way home. About an hour after we got home, she came out of her room, sat next to me on the couch, and just leaned against me. The conversation, such as it was, went something like this: "You okay? No. Anything I can do? Don't move. Okay. Rough time with your dad. Let's not talk about him. You need ice cream, don't you?" Yeah. I took her out for some ice cream, and later that evening she was talking in the other room to her mom and said, "He always knows what I need. I didn't even tell him I needed ice cream, and he just knew." Story 15. My eldest son, who is 8 years old, will randomly say, "Daddy, I love you," when we're just hanging out, then demand cuddles. A personal favorite, which we are quickly outgrowing, is getting my 3-year-old down for a nap. He will be all angry and upset, and I'll say, "Time for a baby and daddy cuddle." Then he'll snug into my arms, drink his milk, and fall asleep. That's the best, and it's going away. Story 16. I have a son for whom I am not the biological father. After about a year, when he was almost 4, he asked me to come lay down with him so he could go to sleep. We usually put on lullabies at a low volume when he lays down. He ended up falling asleep in my arms as What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong played. It was at that moment that I knew I'd protect him until I died. It was at that moment that I became a dad. Story 17. I cannot recall one specific tender moment, but my favorite thing to do is tuck my kids into bed every night. Just having that quiet minute or two of one-on-one time is so awesome. They are growing up way too fast. One will be 12 soon and the other is 9. I know my nightly routine will not be welcomed as much once they are teenagers, so I am enjoying it while it lasts. Story 18. While I'm not a dad, my father and I have a relationship that I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. As a kid, when I was learning to play piano, he would spend time with me trying to help me learn, and we'd always end up playing Heart and Soul. I know, the most overplayed piano duet in history. Fast forward 20 years, I still play very regularly and have gotten into jazz. So whenever I come over, I sit down and play. We still end up playing Heart and Soul, but with me improvising on top. The last time we were playing together, I looked at him and he had the biggest smile on his face, and he was actually tearing up from pure joy. Another recent memory that I will always cherish was when I took him flying a few weeks ago. He is a pilot too, but hasn't flown due to medical issues for close to 25 years. I flew him to our favorite airport and we got lunch there and just enjoyed the beautiful scenery. Then I flew him to where I work and showed him the planes I fly for work, and just like when we played piano together, he had the biggest smile on his face. My mom keeps telling me how much he is still talking about it to her as well as his coworkers. I feel so lucky to share so many different things with him and that we genuinely enjoy each other's company in my adult life. It's making me look forward to when I have children of my own. Story 19. About 5 minutes ago, my youngest son, who is 3, was running around naked for potty training and said, "I have a tiny penis." And then my 6-year-old said, "I have a medium penis, and Dad has a big penis." Story 20. When my 4-year-old daughter realized some kids were poor and didn't have toys, the genuine look of sadness on her face was indescribable. She asked to take her golden monies, the pennies she'd saved up in her piggy bank, and go to Walmart to buy stuff for them. I took her shopping and she spent all her money and $500 of mine, and selflessly picked out presents for the other kids. I asked her if she wanted anything and she said, "No, Daddy, I have plenty. There are kids in need." My heart melted, and in that moment, I felt my greatest success as a father to date. Story 21. Teenage daughter got separated from her ski lesson group and accidentally went up a crazy double black diamond chairlift. Ski patrol brought her down the mountain, and as soon as she saw me waiting for her, she hugged me tightly, crying into my shoulder and wouldn't let go of me for over 5 minutes. I pretty much knew right then and there I had been a pretty good dad all these years to allow me to be the one to comfort her. Mom kind of watched from a few feet away, but I embraced the moment, even crying with her. I'll take that 5 minutes to my grave. I don't need 15 minutes of fame. That 5 was enough to last me a lifetime. Story 22. When my 2-year-old naps in the afternoon, it will be on top of me on the couch. But now, at night, when I'm putting him to bed and we're done with our nearly hour-long routine, I tell him I'm sleepy and have to go to bed. So, he'll lie down and grab my head to lay it on his chest. Then he pats me on the head and says, "Daddy, sleep." Story 23. This might seem insignificant to most, but it still hits me right in the feels. When my son was 3, I bought him a cheap rubber inflatable ball from Walmart. You know the ones, they're basically the size of dodgeballs, but just a little bit softer. Anyway, he wanted it, so I bought it for him. Maybe a day or two later, we were on our way home from somewhere, and he said to me, "Daddy, can we throw the ball?" In the most sweetly innocent way possible. The innocence of it just brought me right back to the simpler times of being a kid. Here's this little 3-year-old boy who doesn't yet know how cynical and backward the world is, doesn't know about bills or jobs or all the burdens of being an adult. He just wanted to throw the ball. He didn't even want to play catch because he didn't know that was a thing yet. He just wanted to literally hold the ball and throw it. Think about how innocent and beautiful that is for a moment. It still makes me weak when I think about that. Story 24. When my daughter's pet rat got sick, my 10-year-old son gave his birthday money to help with the vet bills, then gave her a hug. All his own ideas. Very touching. Story 25. Holding my eldest for the first time, while mom was being stitched up after a tear, is a feeling I'll never forget. Just to add, my second was a home birth and went straight to mom and stayed there for quite some time. My third I held as my wife was in the operating room due to a large hemorrhage and a massive drop in blood pressure. I heard the midwives talking about whether she was going to make it, which took the shine off. Story 26. I'm not close with my daughter, but I try to connect, so it's hard to get any kind of moment with her. About 8 months ago, I found out she was getting bullied at school and at the park, so her mom and I put her in martial arts classes. After a month, she was feeling discouraged because she didn't think she was getting it. I gave her a pep talk about how it builds confidence and gave her an example that I noticed in her. I asked if she thought the instructors got picked on, explained why, the confidence they have in themselves, and other reasons why it's good to keep going and learning. I saw her tear up and she decided to keep going. Now she enjoys it, practices, and loves getting stripes and testing for the next belt. Story 27. My son was 5 and made me a word search puzzle. It wasn't even close to being straight, and he couldn't actually spell the words correctly, but he made it for me. I made a very simple one for him and packed it in his lunch the next day.